Sarah Johnson was a good soul, an African-American woman who became mayor of Red Rock, challenging all conventions of her time. She believed that dignity belonged to all people, regardless of race or origin. Charles Weber stumbled out of the Dusty Dollar Saloon, his expensive clothes stained with whiskey and defeat. The wealthy banker had lost everything at poker again, his pride shattered like glass on the wooden floor inside. Walking down Main Street in the scorching heat, Weber, his eyes fixed on the mayor office at the end of the street. Inside that building sat a safe filled with gold bars and cash meant for town expansion. Enough money to solve all his problems and get revenge on Mayor Sarah Johnson. The clock tower chimed noon as Mayor Sarah Johnson stepped out of her office onto Main Street. Her deep brown skin glistened with perspiration under the merciless sun, and her long black dress rustled in the hot breeze. She carried a leather satchel filled with documents about the new school project. Another step toward making Red Rock a place where every child could learn, regardless of their background. Sarah had been the mayor for 2 years now, elected by a coalition of immigrants, freed slaves, and progressive townspeople who believed in her vision of equality. Her office walls were covered with maps showing planned improvements, a new hospital, expanded roads, and housing for the growing Chinese and Mexican communities. The gold reserves in her safe represented hope for hundreds of families. "Mayor Johnson," called out Mrs. Chen from across the street, waving from her laundry business. Sarah smiled and waved back, her heart warming at the sight of prosperity among people who had been denied basic rights for so long. But her smile faded as she noticed 4 rough-looking men approaching from different directions. Their faces were hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, and their hands rested suspiciously close to their gun belts. Something about their coordinated movement made her skin crawl with unease. "You are coming with us, lady," growled the largest man as they surrounded her. His breath reeked of tobacco and rot, and a jagged scar ran down his left cheek like a lightning bolt. "I am the mayor of this town," Sarah said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "You cannot just, not anymore. You are not," sneered another bandit, grabbing her arm roughly. The leather satchel fell to the dusty ground, scattering her carefully prepared documents. The townspeople on Main Street scattered like frightened rabbits as the 4 men forced Sarah toward their horses. She tried to call out for help, but a dirty hand clamped over her mouth. Within minutes, they had bound her hands and thrown her onto a horse, riding hard toward the desert. Meanwhile, the other 2 bandits broke into the mayor's office through the back window. The safe stood open. Weber had provided them with the combination earlier. Gold bars and stacks of cash disappeared into their saddlebags while the town remained oblivious to the theft occurring in broad daylight. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of sand and stone under the blazing afternoon sun. Sarah's throat was already parched from the dusty ride, and her wrists ached from the tight ropes that bound her hands behind her back. The 4 bandits had ridden hard for 2 hours, taking her deeper into the wasteland where no civilized person would venture. "This will do just fine," announced the scarred leader, dismounting his horse near a weathered wooden post that had once marked some forgotten trail. The desert had claimed everything else: buildings, dreams, and lives, leaving only this solitary sentinel standing against the endless sky. They dragged Sarah from her horse and pressed her back against the rough wooden post. The splinters bit into her skin through her dress as they wrapped thick rope around her waist and shoulders, securing her firmly to the ancient marker. Her boots barely touched the ground, forcing her to strain against the bonds just to breathe properly. "Weber sends his regards," spat one of the bandits, his yellow teeth gleaming in the sunlight. "Says to tell you that Red Rock does not need your kind making decisions for decent folk." "You cannot leave me here," Sarah gasped, her voice hoarse from the dust and fear. "This is murder." "Nah," laughed the scarred man, mounting his horse again. "This is just nature taking its course. Ain't nobody going to find you out here, and ain't nobody going to miss you neither." As their hoofbeats faded into the distance, Sarah found herself alone with the vast emptiness of the desert. The sun was merciless, beating down on her dark skin and making her cotton dress cling to her body with perspiration. She could already feel the first signs of dehydration creeping in. Within an hour, the vultures began to circle overhead, their black wings casting brief shadows that offered no relief from the heat. Scorpions emerged from cracks in the nearby rocks, their tails curved and ready to strike. One particularly large specimen scuttled close to her feet, its pincers clicking ominously in the silence. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to summon strength from memories of her grandmother, who had survived slavery and taught her that dignity could never be taken away, only surrendered. She would not surrender today. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when Sarah heard the soft thud of horse hooves approaching through the sand. Her vision was blurred from dehydration, and she could barely lift her head to see who was coming. The vultures had grown bolder, perching on nearby rocks and eyeing her with patient hunger. A lone rider emerged from the shimmering heat waves like a ghost materializing from another world. He sat tall on his painted horse, his long black hair braided with feathers and beads that caught the golden light. His weathered face bore the proud features of the Apache people, and his dark eyes held the wisdom of someone who had survived many battles. "White man, this rope," he said quietly, dismounting his horse with fluid grace. His voice carried the accent of his people, but his English was clear and strong. "White man, this cruelty." Sarah tried to speak but could only manage a weak croak. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her tongue felt like leather in her mouth. The warrior approached cautiously, studying the vultures and scorpions that had claimed this patch of desert as their territory. "I am Eagle Feather," he said, pulling a sharp knife from his belt. "You are the woman who speaks for justice in the stone town." With swift, precise movements, he cut through the ropes that bound her to the post. Sarah collapsed into his strong arms, her legs too weak to support her weight. Eagle Feather lowered her gently to the ground and produced a water skin from his horse, pressing it to her lips. The cool water was like liquid salvation flowing down her parched throat. She drank greedily until Eagle Feather pulled the skin away, knowing that too much too quickly could make her sick. He then opened a small leather pouch and withdrew some dried meat and berries. "Eat slowly," he instructed, his voice gentle but firm. "Your body must remember how to live again." As Sarah's strength slowly returned, Eagle Feather built a small fire using dry brush and his flint. The sun was setting now, painting the desert in brilliant shades of red and purple. The temperature was beginning to drop, and Sarah realized she would never have survived the cold desert night tied to that post. "Why did you save me?" she whispered, her voice still weak but clearer now. Eagle Feather looked into the flames, his face thoughtful. "Because you treat my people with respect when others do not. Because justice should not die in the desert with buzzards as witnesses." 3 days passed in Eagle Feather's hidden camp nestled between red rock formations that provided shelter from both the desert winds and prying eyes. Sarah's strength returned gradually under his careful attention. He fed her healing herbs and rabbit stew, and slowly the color returned to her cheeks and the fire to her eyes. On the morning of the 4th day, Eagle Feather returned from a scouting trip with news that made Sarah's blood run cold. He had ridden close to Red Rock and overheard conversations in the trading post. Weber was spreading lies throughout the town, claiming that Mayor Johnson had stolen the gold reserves and fled with a gang of criminals. "The white banker with dead eyes is planning something big," Eagle Feather reported, settling beside the small fire. "There is talk of a great poker game. Men are coming from distant towns with heavy purses and hungry hearts." Sarah's mind began working furiously. She knew Weber better than anyone in Red Rock. His arrogance, his gambling addiction, and most importantly, his inability to resist a challenge. If he had stolen her gold to fund his gambling, then he would risk it all again at the poker table. "Tell me more about this tournament," she said, leaning forward with renewed intensity. 7 days and 7 nights of cards. The prize is everything each man brings to the table. Weber boasts that he will win enough to buy the whole territory. Eagle Feather studied Sarah's face carefully. "You have the look of someone planning war." Sarah smiled for the first time since her ordeal began. "Not war, my friend. Justice. But I will need your help to make it work." Over the next 2 hours, they crafted a plan that would have impressed the most cunning military strategist. Eagle Feather had trading connections throughout the territory and could acquire what they needed. Most importantly, he had observed Weber's poker playing style during previous visits to town. "The banker thinks with his pride, not his mind," Eagle Feather noted. "He plays the man, not the cards. This makes him dangerous but also predictable." Sarah nodded, understanding the psychological warfare that would be required. She had always been gifted with numbers and probability, skills that had helped her manage the town's finances and would now serve a different purpose entirely. As the sun set on their 4th day together, Eagle Feather produced a bundle wrapped in deer hide. Inside were men, his clothing, boots, and most crucially, a convincing false beard made from horsehair and tree sap. The transformation was remarkable. Standing before a polished metal mirror that Eagle Feather had acquired from a trader, Sarah barely recognized herself. The horsehair beard was expertly crafted and attached with tree sap that made it appear naturally grown. Her long black hair was hidden beneath a worn cowboy hat, and the loose-fitting men's clothing concealed her feminine figure completely. "You look like a drifter who has seen too many sunsets and not enough luck," Eagle Feather observed with approval. "No one in Red Rock will see Mayor Sarah Johnson when they look at you." Sarah practiced walking with a masculine swagger, lowering her voice to a gravelly whisper that sounded nothing like her natural speaking tone. She studied her reflection from every angle, memorizing the character she would need to become. This mysterious stranger would need a name and a story that could withstand scrutiny. "I will be Samuel Carter," she decided, "a traveling gambler from San Francisco who made his fortune in the goldfields and lost it to bad investments. Now I wander from town to town, living by my wits and card skills." Eagle Feather nodded approvingly. A hungry man plays differently than a desperate one. This Samuel Carter must seem confident but not wealthy, skilled but not unbeatable. As the sun began its descent toward evening, Sarah mounted the horse that Eagle Feather had provided, a sturdy brown mare that would not draw attention. They had rehearsed every detail of her entrance into Red Rock, from her riding posture to the amount of money she would display initially. "Remember," Eagle Feather said as they prepared to part ways, "Weber believes you are dead in the desert. He will be relaxed, overconfident. Use his arrogance against him." The ride back to Red Rock took 2 hours through terrain that Sarah knew intimately despite her disguise. As mayor, she had ridden these trails many times, visiting outlying farms and settlements. Now she was returning as a ghost seeking justice from beyond the grave. The town appeared unchanged from her absence, but Sarah could sense the tension in the air as she rode down Main Street. Wanted posters with her face were nailed to fence posts and building walls, offering a reward for information about the missing mayor and stolen gold. The irony was not lost on her. She dismounted at the Dusty Dollar Saloon, where lamplight and rogue laughter spilled onto the wooden sidewalk. Through the batwing doors, she could see dozens of men gathered around poker tables, their voices raised in excitement and competition. The Dusty Dollar Saloon had been transformed into a gambling palace for the week-long tournament. Extra tables filled every available space, and oil lamps hung from the rafters to provide light for the marathon card sessions. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of whiskey, while the sound of shuffling cards and clinking coins created a symphony of greed. Samuel Carter pushed through the batwing doors with the confident stride of a seasoned gambler. Sarah had practiced this walk for hours, ensuring that every movement appeared masculine and natural. Her boots clicked against the wooden floor as she approached the registration table where a thin man in a green visor was collecting entry fees. "Name?" the clerk asked without looking up from his ledger book. "Samuel Carter, out of San Francisco," Sarah replied in her carefully practiced gravelly voice. "Heard you boys down here know how to play serious poker." The clerk glanced up, studying the newcomer with practiced eyes that had seen countless drifters and dreamers. "Entry fee is $50 gold. No credit, no promises, no sob stories." Sarah placed the required coins on the table with steady hands. Around the room, she could see familiar faces from Red Rock mixed with strangers who had traveled from distant towns and territories. Near the back corner, Charles Weber held court at one of the premium tables, his voice loud and boastful as he regaled listeners with stories of his gambling victories. "Table assignments rotate every 12 hours, the clerk explained, handing Sarah a wooden chip with the number 7 carved into it. "Play starts at sundown and continues until dawn. Then we break for 6 hours and start again. Last man standing after 7 days takes the grand prize." Sarah nodded and made her way to table 7, where 5 other players were already seated. She recognized 2 local merchants, a cattle rancher from the next county, and 2 rough-looking men who appeared to be professional gamblers like her fictional persona. The first hand was dealt just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Sarah played conservatively at first, folding early and observing the playing styles of her opponents. Mathematics had always been her strength, and she began calculating odds and probabilities with the precision of a bank accountant. By midnight, she had won 3 modest pots and established herself as a competent but not exceptional player. The key was to remain invisible while learning everything she could about the competition. Across the room, Weber's laughter echoed regularly as he dominated his table with aggressive betting and psychological intimidation. The tournament progressed with the relentless rhythm of a ticking clock. Each day brought new eliminations as fortunes were won and lost across the green felt tables. Samuel Carter played with the patience of a mountain cat stalking its prey, never revealing the full extent of his mathematical abilities while steadily accumulating chips. By the third day, half the original players had been eliminated. Sarah had advanced through 3 different tables, carefully observing Weber whenever their paths crossed in the saloon. The banker remained supremely confident, his pile of chips growing larger with each passing session. He wore expensive suits and gold cufflinks, displaying his wealth like a peacock showing its feathers. "That Samuel Carter fellow is quite the mystery," Sarah overheard one player commenting during a break. "Plays smart but keeps to himself. Wonder where he learned his card skills." On the 5th day, only 12 players remained at 2 tables. The stakes had grown astronomical, with some pots containing more money than most men saw in a lifetime. Sarah found herself seated directly across from a nervous cattle baron who kept wiping his sweating palms on his vest. Weber dominated the other table with his usual combination of skill and intimidation. Sarah watched him carefully during breaks, noting how he studied his opponents for signs of weakness. His eyes were cold and calculating, like a snake preparing to strike. He had no idea that the person he had tried to murder was sitting 20 feet away. The 6th day brought unexpected drama when one player accused another of cheating. The dispute was settled by the house rules. Both men were ejected from the tournament, leaving only 10 survivors. Sarah advanced to the final table along with Weber, and for the first time, they would be playing directly against each other. As they took their seats for the 7th and final day, Weber glanced at Samuel Carter with mild interest. "Don't believe we've been properly introduced, friend." "Charles Weber, owner of Red Rock First National Bank." "Samuel Carter," Sarah replied in her gravelly voice, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "Heard you read quite the player around these parts." Weber's smile was predatory. "I've been blessed with natural talent and the courage to back it up with real money. Hope you brought enough to make this interesting." The final day began at noon with 10 players and a prize pool that exceeded the annual budget of most frontier towns. Sarah had never felt pressure like this before, knowing that everything depended on her ability to outplay the man who had tried to kill her. The mathematical calculations that had always come naturally to her now felt like weapons in a war for justice. The final table had been reduced to just 2 players after 18 grueling hours of cards. Samuel Carter sat across from Charles Weber in a psychological duel that had captivated every spectator in the Dusty Dollar Saloon. Mountains of chips, gold coins, and cash created small fortunes between them, representing not just money but the very soul of Red Rock itself. Weber's confidence had never wavered throughout the tournament, but now tiny beads of perspiration dotted his forehead despite the cool evening air. This mysterious stranger had proven more formidable than expected, matching him play for play with an almost supernatural understanding of mathematical probability. "You play like a man with nothing left to lose," Weber observed, trying to read the emotions behind Samuel Carter's steady gaze. "But also like someone who understands numbers better than most schoolteachers." Sarah kept her voice level and gravelly. "Numbers do not lie the way people do. Cards follow patterns that honest men can predict." The crowd pressed closer as the dealer shuffled for what everyone sensed would be the final hand. Weber had bet everything he owned, including the stolen gold from the mayor, was safe. His entire fortune rested on this single moment, just as Sarah had planned from the beginning. The cards were dealt with ceremonial slowness. Sarah glanced at her hand and felt her heart skip a beat. 3 queens stared back at her, with a 10 and jack completing the hand. Across the table, Weber's face remained carefully neutral, but she caught a tiny twitch at the corner of his left eye. The betting began conservatively, but within minutes both players were pushing massive stacks of chips toward the center of the table. Weber's eyes gleamed with the desperate hunger of a man whose entire identity depended on this victory. "All in," Weber announced dramatically, shoving his remaining chips forward. "Everything I own says my hand beats yours, stranger." Sarah paused for theatrical effect, knowing that every person in the saloon was holding their breath. "Call," she said simply, matching his bet and revealing her 3 queens. Weber's face turned to action as he laid down his cards, a pair of kings with nothing else of value. The crowd erupted in cheers and gasps as the impossible happened. Charles Weber, the most feared poker player in the territory, had been defeated by a mysterious drifter. But Weber's His reaction was not the gracious acceptance of defeat that poker tradition demanded. His hand moved with lightning speed toward the revolver at his hip, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You cheated," he screamed, drawing the weapon and aiming it at Samuel Carter's chest. The gunshot echoed through the dusty dollar saloon like thunder, followed by a silence so complete that even the ticking of the wall clock seemed deafening. Samuel Carter staggered backward, clutching his left shoulder where Weber's bullet had found its mark. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining the white shirt beneath his vest. But instead of falling, Samuel Carter straightened up with a strength that surprised everyone in the room. With his good hand, he reached up and slowly pulled away the horsehair beard that had concealed his identity for 7 days. Long black hair tumbled free from beneath the cowboy hat as the disguise fell away. "My name is not Samuel Carter," she announced in her natural voice, clear and strong despite the pain. "I am Sarah Johnson, the mayor of Red Rock, and this man tried to have me murdered." Gasps and shouts of amazement filled the saloon as the truth crashed over the assembled crowd like a flash flood. The woman they had believed dead in the desert stood before them, wounded but very much alive, having just defeated her would-be killer at his own game. Weber's face went white as fresh snow. The smoking revolver trembled in his grip as the full magnitude of his situation became clear. "Impossible," he whispered. "You died in the desert. My men left you to die." "Your men left me to die." "Yes," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But Eagle Feather of the Apache found me and saved my life. While you spread lies about my stealing the town, is gold. I was learning the truth about your gambling debts and your racist hatred." Sheriff Morrison pushed through the crowd, his hand resting on his own weapon. "Weber, drop that gun right now. You under arrest for attempted murder and theft of municipal funds." The crowd began to murmur as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Weber had stolen the gold to cover his gambling losses, then tried to eliminate the only person who could expose his crimes. His plan had been perfect except for one crucial element. He had underestimated the determination of the woman he tried to destroy. "I never cheated at cards," Sarah said, addressing the room. "I won this money through skill and mathematics, and I intend to use every penny for what it was always meant for: building schools, hospitals, and opportunities for every citizen of Red Rock, regardless of their race or origin." Weber dropped his weapon and sank to his knees as the sheriff placed him in shackles. The crowd began to cheer, their voices raised in support of their mayor who had returned from the dead to claim justice. Red Rock had learned an important lesson about prejudice, courage, and the power of truth.